Tell me, are you ready to find your weird way? Weird was a concept that was spoken of long ago. It meant fate, it meant destiny, it meant your path in life. I'm your host, Dean Bentley, and I am here to explore how you can connect to your own path in life, to know the essence of your own soul, to connect to that single spark that lives within the deepest recesses of your being that says, this is why I am here, to go beyond the limitations, the constrictions of the modern world, and open you to the possibilities and the potentiality of what is possible within this world. Join me as we dive deep on the weird way. Welcome. We are back on the weird way. This is the first episode of season 2 where I get to bring a guest on and have another epic conversation. This one is very, very exciting for myself. I'm speaking to Seth Westhead, a speaker, a consultant, a mentor, and a creator. And we've been connected for the last few years, and he's been a man I've respected. I've got to see him in the work and what he's bringing to this world. And to be able to drop in and have this conversation, brother, I deeply appreciate your time, your energy, and having you here today. Welcome, man.
100%, bro. Yeah, no, thank you for having me on, and it's a real privilege to be in your space and sitting down to have a yarn.
Absolute pleasure, man. We actually connected probably 2 years ago when we set up an episode on your podcast, The Sentient Savage, and that was a delicious conversation. We talked about myth, we talked about story, and I think that's something that's connected to both our hearts, which for me feels very alive. Where I wanted to take this conversation was before we jumped on, we started recording, we're having some conversations around what it means to be a creator in this modern age. And I think that's where a lot of the world is moving. And as creators, I find that we are becoming the new storytellers of the modern age. So I'm curious on your views around what's it mean to be a creator when you say that you're a creator? What's that mean for you, man?
I love that question, brother. Thank you. And this is something, the reason I say creator is because I feel like that word has room to evolve. It's not something that's been coined or defined just yet. And it's actually something that I feel like we all are. I feel like at our essence, we're all creative beings. And that can range from creating a beautiful meal to creating a life that we love, manifestation and creating the things that we think, and also creating a human being, right? Like I'm a father, and I think one of the big realizations I had when I became a father was like, wow, this is what it means to be a creator. And if I can, well, it would co-create really. If I can be a part of a co-creation of another human being, then man, I can create anything, absolutely anything. And that it was such a powerful and exciting realization. And what I now know to be true experientially is that I can create anything. Anything that comes to my mind, I can bring that to life into this plane of existence. And that makes me feel just electric, absolutely electric. Like in some way I've like hacked the matrix and I know the secret, but we can all do it. And I think that's what's another exciting thing for me is that it's possible for everybody. So, being a creator for me, it's my podcast is the Sentient Savage podcast is an aspect of creation. It's something that was in my mind that I brought to life. Artworks, digital artworks. I do a little bit of that, which is creation, creating rituals within my family, creating the life that we want to live, creating my work, my body of work. We spoke a little bit about legacy, creating a legacy. All of those things come into what it means to be a creator for me. And yeah, it's tapping into an energy that just allows things to flow through me and be manifest in this plane of reality. So
I love that answer, man. And a big part of what it reminded me of is this remembrance of our own divinity. Like we come into this world and we have the possibility of creation. And I think for a lot of us, I know for me, when I started in this world, I was in a more survival level of consciousness. It was like, okay, I just need to do this to survive. Like that was why I wanted to go to uni. It's
mm,
why I wanted to get the good job. And it was a path set out for me with the end goal being, okay, what can I do to just survive? There wasn't ideas of what I really, really wanted to do or what was a possibility of creation. It was just like, okay, this is just what you do. This a very one track lane, and that consciousness doesn't support the opportunities and the awareness that more is possible within this world. And I know for me, when I started healing, I was pretty depressed at the start of my journey. I started creating, which was small. It was like artwork, it was poetry, and I was like, oh my God, I have something inside of me that is unique, that is completely new to this world. No one had done that before, not in the
mm,
same way. And I think this realization is what gives us our spark and brings us back into like, oh my God, reality is something I can construct or I can build upon. And I'm wondering if there's something
mm,
you can speak into this or maybe your own journey of like when you discovered that you were a creator and what that was like for you.
mm. I've been reflecting on this actually, man. So it's timely that you bring it up. I was having a conversation with my wife the other day about the different evolutions of, I didn't call it creation, but the different evolutions of things that I've tried my hand at. So yeah, it's really timely that this comes up. Um, these are a few things I've just tried over the years, right? I remember year nine in high school, the English teacher I had exposed us to this new website called Glogster, is what it was called. And you basically developed up this scrapbook type image, and you could overlay songs on it, and you could write and have pictures. And it was basically an interactive Instagram post. And I didn't say it to anybody, but when we got on this app for our English class, I frothed it. I absolutely loved this fucking thing, man. It was so cool. And in the class, it was a bit like, oh, yeah, this is weird, whatever, we'll just do this for the teacher and then see you later. But I actively used it at home. So I was using it on my evenings after school. I was using it on weekends. I was putting song lyrics to songs and making cool images. I just really loved it. Um, it didn't really go anywhere, but it didn't need to. It was just about the creation aspect of things. It wasn't long after that, year 10, I'd been interested in poetry, and we, like you, and I'd got into writing some poetry actually through that same English teacher. And it was for an assignment, and I ended up writing 6 or 7 different poems about aspects of reality, like time and love and things like that. And then I started putting that poetry to music, and I started getting into hip hop. And I actually, for a time there, I started making hip hop videos. So I would play and overlay hip hop beats to my own raps. And I started publishing those. I had them on YouTube. I was sharing them around the school. There was one time actually, so I grew up in a town, Mildura, on the Murray River, just on Barkinji and Lachi Lachi country, which is right in the top corner of Victoria, New South Wales, and South Australia, where they all meet. And I did a rap video. I put a post out on Facebook, and I said, everyone who likes this will be included in my next rap video. And there was about uh, maybe 60 to 70 different likes on it. And I included every single person's name in my next YouTube rap video. And these were like other kids from all around the different schools in the Mildura area. So, it was so fun, man. Like, and I didn't give a fuck what other people thought. There was a little bit in me that, you're a kid, you're a teenager, that has that bit of judgment, but largely I just didn't give a fuck because I had so much fun. Um, and I stopped, and I kind of can't remember why I stopped, but I did. But I had so much fun doing that, and then the next iteration, I got into fitness pretty hardcore, and I started making fitness vlogs, and I started uploading those on YouTube, and again, it was so much fun, man. I didn't care. I really enjoyed it, and I got some criticism from people out in the world that's like, "Oh, fucking, who do you think you are?" and this and that, but my heart and my soul felt so nourished. It felt so nourished, man. And I suppose it's always been a part of who I was, and really come out in my teenage years was where it started to flourish. And it's ebbed and flowed, where it's become a major part of my life or less so. It's whether it generates me an income or it doesn't. But it's always been a yearning of my soul to want to create and engage with new technology to create. And I think that's what's kind of led me here. It's led me to the podcasting space. It's led me to sharing my inner world online, things like Instagram, and Facebook, and creating videos. And it's so much fun, man. That's yeah.
I love this piece because for me, there's something a place we can create from where we're trying to create for what we think people want. It's like I'm going to create this for you because
Yeah.
you need this, and then there's an aspect where we actually get to create from that place of like I don't really care if people like want listen to this or watch this, but I know this is being asked for me to be brought forth into this world. And sure, we can have that judgment, but I feel when I've connected to that and it's like, I know I need to bring this forth. It was like this podcast. There's that, the insecurities, the fears that come up when I create anything new, but they're not really real. It just wants to keep us small. But when we're connected to that essence, it's like, hey, this wants to move through you. This wants to create. There is such a rich beauty when we let go of the outcome and just allow this to
Mm,
emerge from ourselves. And for me, this is such a different place because I think a lot of people dissociate from the identity of a creator because they're like, afraid of judgment. For me, it was people and myself saying, "Oh, I can't sing, I can't dance, I can't draw, I can't paint." Like all these things I can't do, which I like the artistic field, which is very much a creator space, because we think we're creating from something for someone else rather than actually creating from the
yeah.
space of, I want to bring this forth. I want to see what happens if I draw like this and then I draw that. Like it's not about creating a beautiful piece of art or like receiving a certain amount of money. Creation is for creation's sake. It gives life to a space. And this is something
Mm.
we need to remember because, like you, it was like, I'm having fun. And it sounds like it led you from one path to the next. It was like, cool, I did some rap and that was really fun. I love that because I'm currently listening to Will Smith's audiobook and he's talking all about his rap career and I'm like, yes, maybe give us some rap
Yeah.
later. Um, and then like your creation flowed into the fitness space where it was, oh, now I'm doing vlogs and that. And did you find your creation kind of or where you felt to create kind of determined your path and where you were going in life and there was different stages along the way?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, man, because it was either the expression of creation that drove it, or where I was at the time, I just created in that space. So, for example, I started off in university studying veterinary science, and it was very heady. You got to learn a lot of anatomy, a lot of physiology, and things like that. And it's a lot of just learning what is, not necessarily what could be. It's trying to read the signs, and arguably there's some creation in it, but I didn't find a whole lot of creative expression, and I ended up leaving that degree and jumped into a Bachelor of Health Science, majoring in nutrition and physiology. And one of the reasons I did that was because I was very interested in my own body and my own experience, And I suppose fitness in itself, Arnold Schwarzenegger in Pumping Iron talks about bodybuilding as an art. You're sculpting your body. It's creation, literally. You're building muscles and shaping muscles in a particular way. So I suppose an expression of fitness was creation. And then I moved into creating vlogs and things like that, documenting my experiences. That's something that I've always been interested in doing too, is documenting my experiences and sharing those. Um, I'm a very reflective person, and actually, some of the ways that I realize my reflections is when I speak to people. Sometimes I'm like, oh shit, that's what I think after I've said it. But it's a very therapeutic process for me to talk because it reflects back what I think, feel, and believe, and it gives me an opportunity to
Yep.
challenge that if I need to out there. Because once I've spoke it, it's out there, and I can work with it. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure whether it was the creation. I feel like it may have been my creative expression coming through no matter what I was doing, in any stage. It just had such a strong desire to come through. Um, and again, we're creating all the time. So whether we're cooking a meal, whether we're setting up a space or those sorts of things, we're always creating. Oh, one of the things
I
I did want to
completely
mention, you
agree with
mentioned
you.
Will Smith's book. As you were talking about the divine and creation flowing through us, I was going to ask if you've read Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, because that is quite
No.
phenomenal. Rick Rubin, the producer.
Mm. I've heard of Rick Rubin, but I have not touched on that, and now I'm deeply curious. Mm.
You love it.
Uh,
Yeah, guarantee you love it, and your listeners will probably love it too. So.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I feel like that's a piece. I've read The Artist's Way, which is for me is a very similar thing. It's like the hero's journey of creation. And so for those that don't know, Joseph Campbell, he framed what was called the hero's journey, which is a stage of development for the individual, but it also basically determines every story ever told. At the start, a person is a hero, doesn't know. He goes on a journey to discover who he is, defeat his enemies, which can be his internal struggles, faces his challenges, and then on the other side, he becomes a new person. Now, in The Artist's Way, which is based upon the hero's journey, it speaks to this more deeply, and it's made me recognize the creative act is the modern day hero's journey. We live in a world where there's not really too much we can explore outside anymore. Like we basically have ability to see anything in the world. I was having a conversation the other day with my partner, and I recognized that basically I've seen every animal in the world, even if I haven't seen it, and there's no
Mm.
surprise. It's not no like, oh my god, that animal exists. Like imagine back in the day when you're wandering through a different like you if you traveled overseas and you go wandering and you find a new animal, it would have been like, what is that thing? And now we don't really have that mystery with the world. So I find that artist is or the creator is the one who actually is exploring the frontier of the psyche or the human world because it's like the internal world that is bringing through through creation.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
mm. Yeah, that was just a side tangent and a little bit of a rant because I feel like I can get very, very excited about this conversation around creation. I had a piece
Little
there.
side
I'm seeing
quest on
if
the
I can
hero's
find.
journey.
I've literally got a board behind me that has like my side quests, my main quests, all of that on it. For the audience, I've created a framework to make our work, like our business or our world, into a game where we have quests, we have side quests, we've had sub quests, there's experience grinds, there's rewards, achievements. If you want that, send me a message, but it's just a way to gamify this life and be like, oh, we are having fun. We are creating from this space. That I found the piece. So for me, that there's this awareness that for some audiences and some people that may be listening, they may be dissociative from the idea that they are a creator. And for me, this is like a falsity. But I'd love if you could speak onto your experience of this, if you've met people who are like, I'm not a creator, and then helping them recognize that, hey, maybe they are and they're just not seeing it.
Mm. Yeah, and it comes from a lot of men. I have primarily worked with men and youth throughout my mentoring journey, and a lot of men will say that I'm not a creator. I'm not in touch with my creative essence, and I'll say things. Well, do you build things with your hands? It's like, oh, yeah. Well, that's creation. Do you cook? Yeah, well, that's creation, right? And it's letting them come to the realization that they're already creating. It's just what they've deemed as creation is art class in high school that they were shit at, right? Oh, well, I couldn't draw, so I'm not a creator, or I can't paint, or I can't sing, which all of that's a fallacy as well. You can. It's just the standard at which you set yourself, and something you said earlier, what you're doing it for. You may not be Mariah Carey or Beyonce and you're singing to make, millions of dollars, but it doesn't mean you can't sing. Of course you can sing. You open your mouth and you speak and hum a tune, you can sing. And so I think it's partly that is recognizing first where you're already creating in your own life, and then two, setting the standard of what are you creating for, and understanding that creation is something that wants to happen. We want to create. It's bubbling up inside us to want to happen. We need to come back to what do we enjoy creating? And one of the ways we can do that is by reflecting back in our childhood and what's something that we used to do as a kid that we've stopped doing now. Something that we used to do that we loved doing as a kid that we've stopped doing now. And when we take that reflection back, we can go, well, as a kid, I really used to love building Lego, man. And I haven't built anything like that for a long time. Cool. Well, let's start to explore that again. Understand, why did you stop? Oh, because it doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't have to get you anywhere. That's the point. It doesn't have to get you anywhere. And now we start to understand, the reason I was creating, the reason I thought I had to create was to make money, was to get ahead, was to etc., 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 rather than just be in the creative act itself, which is therapeutic. It's a therapeutic act to create. It's something that we want to do. And something I've noticed on my own journey is when I'm fulfilled creatively, the rest of my life flows a lot easier. The energy within my body flows a lot easier. And actually, more specifically, sexual energy flows a lot easier because sexual energy is the energy of creation. And this is something that, excuse me being crude and blunt, but guys that are, and again I say this because I work largely with men, but guys that are masturbating a lot have lost that touch with their creative energy because they're just expelling it all the time, all the time, all the time. And it's like, well, let's hold on to that for a second and see if we can use that to create something else. And that kind of sexual transmutation, and transmutation of that sexual energy into creative energy is something that's been really powerful for me as well.
Mm. And I feel like there's a common theme here for a lot of men when they feel like, oh, they're not creators, and they use their sexual energy in different ways, unhealthy ways. And for me, it feels like there's a block here that doesn't allow them to create from condition and from like society. Uh, Now, in yourself or from your own experience or what you've seen with the that you work with, what have you felt is that block that maybe stops them using that energy in a more creative way?
Maybe not understanding that that's what it can be used for. Sexual energy can sometimes feel uncomfortable. And that's the same with creative energy. Sometimes it can feel uncomfortable. It can bubble up and we're like, oh, I just need to get this out. And so we go bust a nut and get it out. Or we bottle it up with the creative energy. We just bottle it up and hold it in, hold it in, hold it in. And so I think it's like we've caught this hot potato and we don't know what to do with it. And it's like when you realize that it's actually not that hot, Let's stop. Let's feel it. What does it feel like? What's its shape? How does it sit within my body? Where does it sit within my body? What's behind this? And how can I shape this into something? How can I maybe shape it into something new? And once we start to explore rather than expel, we can start to cultivate a new relationship with it. So I feel like that's part of that process, is just sitting with it for a little while. You know, it doesn't mean you're never going to have an orgasm again or ever have a release again, but it's like sit with it for a little bit and try and feel what that feels like in your body. The creative energy, sit with it for a little bit. You don't have to get up and go and do something all the time. Just sit, be still. And I think that, practices like meditation and breath work, things that drop us into being still and in a reflective state, give us the ability to explore. And when we can explore, then we can figure out where this might want to go or what it might want to channel into. And if you've ever really been deep in a creative experience or a sexual experience, you're not in your mind. You're gone. It's like something else is working through you. And there'll be some people that are like, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about." And yeah, maybe because you're too much in your head. Those energies of creation, of sexuality and sexual energy, they are so potent. And if you allow yourself to just be taken by them within an experience, man, there's a lot of beautiful things in there.
I feel that, man. I feel that. And like the piece I feel like I want to bring to this conversation is when we consider the world and we consider the conditioning that has been prevalent and the interlinked of sexual energy and creative energy, there's been a shunning of sexuality for the last however many years. That there's been a lot of done from religion, from church, from even just societal conditioning that says sexuality is bad. Now, when I see this on a grand scheme, I can see that we've come into society which has more rules, more regulation, more boxes for the human soul to fit within. And so we try and fit within that context of, okay, this is who I am and this is who I need to be. And now the thing with sexuality and creative energy, or sexual energy and creative energy, it wants to break a lot of those boxes. It wants to us to step outside of that because it's actual life. It's like the tree doesn't grow in the way that you want a tree to grow. The tree grows in the way that life is asking it to grow. It is the
Mm,
same with our sexual energy. It wants to move in its own way. It wants to be expressed in its own way. Same with creative energy. So when we have conditions around, oh my God, my sexual energy needs to look like this. I'm a man, so I can't, be in a more feminine, maybe flowy state, or I can't create because I can't draw. Which is just, I
mm,
don't believe in my own ability to draw. I have judgment around my drawing. It creates a
mm,
restriction around that. And then that energy needs to be released somewhere. And
mm,
the shame around sexuality makes it the shadow. So a lot of people, men especially, be like, well, I can get one off, get rid of this, and then I don't have to look at the box I'm in. The like the
mm,
way I live my life and the constraint and the structure that keeps me trapped. And I think this is an important piece for a lot of men.
mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, man, my experience with it is, at times I've had a libido that's so high that I just don't know what to do with it. And part of that is, that in those times I haven't been creating. There hasn't been a balance. There's been no other outlet for that energy. That's how it manifests. But for me, that is an indication that, hey man, it's time to create, or you haven't been creating. And that's what I've learned through my own experience of exploration with that energy and with myself over time. And it's not something you necessarily come to straight away, but understanding the interplay of those energies for me, and that when I'm creating, my sexual energy is way more balanced, which feels good and feels right for me. Um, and I feel when I'm creating a lot more whole. I'm able to, um, relax into fun. And if I haven't created for a while, I get uptight. I get, I get irritated. I get frustrated, and that's not good to be around. It's not how I want to be. And I know that when I'm creating, be it writing, be it playing around with some things, be it the podcast, be it just creating with my daughter, right? Kids are a brilliant way, man, to bring you into that creative energy, because they're creating all the time, whether it's building blocks, whether it's drawing, whether it's pretend with their imaginations. Tapping back into that through with children is an incredible way to bring you back into that play, because I mean, sex is play and creation is play. That's what it is. It's play, and that's how that's how we navigate the world. That's how we learn. We learn through play, and yeah, coming back to that has been in my more adult life has been a really powerful thing, man. It's yeah, it's beautiful.
Mhm. When you're talking there, I feel like I connect to almost the innocence of sexual energy and life force energy, but also the simplicity of play. Like I've worked with a lot of people at this point, and one of the sins that I often see, and I know from my own journey, was a disownment of my inner child. Of like, I'm a man now, so I'm a big tough man, and I've got to be working towards something. I've got to hustle. I've got to push. All that conditioning, and it's this remembrance that, oh, we all have a little child inside of ourselves, and I think this is what happens when we're around other children. It's like, oh, they get they help us remind, oh, it gets to be fun, we can create whole worlds with our imagination and then enter them,
Mm,
and it doesn't have to be so serious. Like, we can be like, I'm walking up the street, but I'm really walking to the witch to go get herbs for my potion and brew that up. And it's like, we can actually live within that world frame, and it's not
mm,
about the reality of the situation, but it's like, oh, does having that experience of like, oh, I could make this into a fantastical quest, like making everything you do in business a quest, does that add
mm,
to your world? Does that help expand it and add energy into your life? And I feel like that is something that wants to be brought back into this world on
mm,
in such a deeper way.
mm.
Mm,
I feel like as you're speaking, one of the things that we've fallen into is we've become consumers, not creators. How many
mm,
people I don't know this, but how many people are on Instagram that actually don't post, and they have a sense of pride around that? I used to have a sense of pride that I
yeah.
didn't post on Instagram, and there were all these people out there trying hard. That was a story I carried, and now I am one of those tryhards that I used to judge. And but now I'm creating. I'm not consuming, and we need to balance that. We need to balance that, because as a general society, we are consuming so much. We consume movies, we consume music, we consume books. Even we're not creating those things ourselves anymore, because they're handed to us. You just flick on Netflix and zone out,
Mm,
and that world building that you're talking about is there for us. It's laid out. You look at another example is the book. June is like a thick,
mm,
thick brick. Like, and you look at that and go, oh, do I read that and have to build that world in my mind, or do I just go and watch episode one that's just dropped? Right. The easy option is to
mm,
just watch episode one. Um, I on that same example, I've revisited The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So I'm currently reading The Lord of the Rings. I just recently finished The Hobbit, and the world building of Tolkien in those books is phenomenal. Like, he is a master, an absolute master, and there is
yeah.
no way you can create to that extent without having a connection with your inner child. There is no way. Um, that is, yeah, it's imagination beyond belief. It's so beautiful, and to go in and be invited into that world and invited to build that world within your own mind is a really, um, it's a really potent experience. And I then watched the movie. So I read The Hobbit and then I watched the movies after it, and just being able to look at the difference between those two experiences and the way that it was created on
Mm,
screen versus the way it was created in my mind as I read. And yeah, that's
mm,
something I think we've moved away from too. We just, and whether it's part of hustle culture or the conditioning that, hey, look, it's time to grow up now. It's time to put that wizard hat away. It's time to put those fairy wings down. Like, it's time to be a big boy and a big girl. You got to go and you got to earn a job and you got to serious. Like, we've lost connection with that part of ourselves, that is so vital. It's so vital, and I feel like that's a potentially a big one for men, but all people, is we've lost connection with that inner creative little boy or that creative little girl who wanted to explore and wanted to play, and at some point they got told, or they were led to believe that it was time to put that away.
Oh, I love when you were speaking just how many rules I realize I've broken to get to where I am. Like, you like put the wizard hat away. There's a wizard hat in the background. Maybe you can't see it on
Yeah.
camera, but when I do my quest, I put on my wizard hat because I'm like, I want to embody
Yeah.
that. And
Hell
there
yeah.
was this journey I went on in business where it was like, oh, I was in the hustle. I was like creating because I need to make this happen. I need to make the money. I need to get to the next stage and get the next fin. And that was a lot of
Mm,
my energy and where it was going. And I asked myself this question one day of like, what would I create if I was working from my inner child?
mm,
And that changed the trajectory of my business. It made me kill off a lot of what I was creating because I was like, oh, I'm doing this because I think I should, or because I think this is what men need, and all of this. And it was like,
mm,
I don't want to add more shit to the world. I want to create something new. I want to create something
mm,
that speaks from my own soul. And
mm,
I think too often we get caught in that loop of, I need to do this because that's what it is, because there's a disconnect from that child. And I love what you're speaking to in regards to the books because I'm currently reading The Wheel of Time. I'm addicted. I'm like on book 14 at the moment, and it's the last one. And I'm like, I want to go read it right now. I'm so in this story. And I tried to watch the series, and I watched the first episode, and I was like, this is like, there was a lack. There was a lack that I could not connect to it. I've talked to other people, and they're like, I love this series. And I'm like, there's vital pieces that I created from my imagination that aren't there. And it just doesn't
mm,
have the same appeal. And so often when something will not have the same appeal, like I don't think of many movies that I've watched that have had the same appeal to me as the books of them I've read. Like Dune, I
mm,
love Dune, one of my favorite books of all time. The movie, they did
mm.
awesome. I'm pretty stoked for what they did, but it's still not the book for me. And no matter what they
Yeah.
do, it won't be because that's the imagination. That's what's key, I think, so often.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, man. I mean, the same with The Hobbit, right? Like, I think The Hobbit was a little trash. Lord of the Rings can't falter. Like, it's one of the best book to movie adaptations ever. That's those three movies are absolutely phenomenal. Um, but yeah, I hear you, and it's lacking that vital piece of imagination that's uniquely you. Right? It's uniquely you because even though those words are on the page and even though the author was building a specific thing in their head, it's not what you're going to receive. And that's what's cool about creation, is it's got your unique stamp on it. As you bring it forward in the world, it's your unique stamp. So, something I've realized is, as creators, we're not competitors. Right? Although you and I might both work with men in a mentorship capacity, it's different because what I can create and bring forward and the men I appeal to are different to the men you appeal to. And that's beautiful
Yeah.
because even if we're saying the exact same thing, and a lot of the time we do, and that's why I think we get on so well, we're doing that in a different way. We're bringing forward in a different way, right? You look different to me. We wear different clothes. We have a unique style. Even those little bits are all creation. How many of us are just walking around wearing the clothes that we think we should wear versus wearing the clothes that actually appeal to us in the way that we look, the way we want to look and express ourselves in the world. It's one of the reasons I have tattoos. It's one of the reasons I have dreadlocks. It's one of the reasons I have piercings and wear the clothes that I do, is because that is an expression of who it is that I want to be. And it's an expression of creativity. It's an expression of creativity that I want to bring out into the world as my unique self.
I think it's one of the biggest sins in this world that people feel like they need to be someone else to do what they want to do in this world. And I think this is the piece you're speaking to. I've worked with a lot of people who come to me and they're like, I feel like an imposter. And they have this vision, they have this
Mm,
dream, and they're like, who am I to bring this forth? And I'm like, you are the exact persons that needed for that dream because otherwise
mm.
you wouldn't have the dream. Like that's it for me. It's
Yeah,
like why you're given that
yeah,
gift is because you're the exact person that's right for that. And it breaks my heart when a person's like, who am I? Because I've done that. I'm like, who am I, Dean? You used to have a list. Who are you to be creating a podcast? You have no right to speak. What do you have to say? All the bullshit
mm,
stories. They come to us, but it's like I was given a vision, a dream that like lives in my heart. I know when I turn away from it and I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. I feel more dead. I feel disconnected. I don't feel as alive. And then when people like, I'm not that person. I don't know if I have the right to do this. Well, you were born here. This is why you're here. And like this is where I see the world going. We're living in a beautiful time. Like me and you, we're creators, like in the more traditional sense. We're creating on Instagram and all of that. But I see this as expanding so much more because people can create a business out of things they love now. Like when in the history of the world has that
yeah,
occurred? It's like I love to
yeah,
support people, I love to help people, I love to do that. I get to create a business from that. Other people can create it in their own way. Like if someone taught me how to paint beautiful oil paintings, I would pay for that. I would love that. You know, it's like someone could teach that and we have the ability to learn that. And it's like, this is what has excited me in this day and age, like where we are going. And I'm curious for you if you've thought about like where we're going as a species when we're starting to go into this creator world where, you know, each of us can recognize we are creators, that we have something to share.
mm. Yeah. It's look. I think the more that each individual connects with what is the creative vision that lives inside them and works towards bringing that forward, the more beautiful world we'll be in. Because when you're creating from that place, you don't care about what else is going on. You're not trying to bring people down. You're not tied up and bent up in yourself. You're not judging others or feeling judgment from others. You're feeling fulfilled. Like when we're able to connect with that creative vision that lives inside us and take the steps towards it, I mean, the world would just be a much better place. And that's one of the things that I really harp on when I work with people is what's your vision? You know, like what do you want to bring into the world? Be it with your family, be it in your relationship, be it in your individual work, be it in the legacy and the things that you want to leave behind. Like, what does your soul or your being desire in this world? What does it want to bring forward? And sometimes the answer to that is I don't know yet, and that's okay. And that's where I would work with somebody to remove some of this conditioning or some of the, excuse me, gunk to allow that transmission to come through, to allow that vision to be received. Because the way I think about it is we're like an antenna. And there's scientific truth to this, right? We're picking up vibrations all the time, feedback in, feedback out all the time. And if that antenna is bent out of shape because of the food we're eating, because of the stress we're under, because of the environments we're in, because of the substance we're ingesting, all of that sort of stuff, if it's bent out of shape, it's not going to be able to pick up that authentic, the vision or that creative energy that wants to move through us. But when we start to pull some of that away, we're open to receiving. And as we start to receive that vision, like you've said, it becomes unbearable. Man. Like it becomes unbearable to not do it. And now, what I will say is, some people have more gunk on that antenna than others, and some have it not by their own choice either. Right? Like some people are living in situations not by their own choice that are really detrimental to their being. Um, and be that insecurity, financial insecurity, food insecurity, violent environments, all of those sorts of things, it becomes very hard to be able to connect to that. So, um, but again, I'm saying if people were just living their authentic self, and majority of people were living out their visions, that we wouldn't have those issues either, because people wouldn't be looking to try and get one up on somebody else. So yeah, that I think the more we create from that point of view, the better world we're going to be in. And that creative energy I've found is really pure. It's not an OnlyFans content creator. Like it's this really pure, beautiful energy that wants to serve and bring value to
Mm.
others. Um, yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Mm. That's beautiful, man. Thank you. Thank you. So I feel like I want to segue with this piece here, similar thread, but also weave in some other elements we talked about earlier. Is like we've talked about you about to become father to your second child, and you've already had your first child. And I think that's such a beautiful aspect of this creation that you're bringing through. And I know for you that reconnection to your lineage as well has been really powerful in building that and developing that. And what I was feeling was that in this new birth, your new child coming into this world, in a way, you are becoming a creator for their worldview and their reality by reconnecting to your own past and helping heal that line. So I'm curious of that process for yourself, man, when you're thought of bringing children into this world and that process of bringing new life and also wanting to reconnect to your ancestry as well. What was that process like to come into that?
Mm. Yeah, thank you for this question. Um, so, for those that don't know, I have Aboriginal family connections up to modern day Newcastle and through central New South Wales. That's the land of the Awabakal and the Wiradjuri people. I didn't grow up on my country. I grew up in Mildura on Barkinji and Lachi Lachi country. And my grandmother, where my lineage is through, was a member of the stolen generation. So, again, for those that don't know or aren't familiar with the Australian context, the stolen generations are a period of Australian history where a lot of Aboriginal children were removed from their families under assimilation policies in an attempt to really decimate and disconnect Aboriginal children from their culture and their family heritage. The funny thing about that is you can try as best you can, but it's always going to find its way back. And it might not be the next generation or the generation after, but there's going to be something inside these people that you can't sever. As much as you try, you'll never be able to sever that. And that's why, Aboriginal culture here in Australia is the oldest surviving culture on the planet. There's scientific estimates that Aboriginal people have been here for 65 to 80,000 years. Now, as Aboriginal people, we say we've always been here, and that science is just catching up. So there's this knowing and this practicing of culture that's continued on and expressed itself in beautiful new ways as the landscape around us has changed. Very similar to creative energy, right? Like no matter what you do, you can't sever that from yourself. It's a piece of you and it's always going to want to come through. And I actually would extend that to anybody, right? Anybody, um, whether you're English, whether you're Australian, whether you're from New Zealand, whether you're Maori, whether you're from Southeast Asia, there's an element of your culture that really wants to always come through. And it's just different layers of disconnection from that. But it's still there. It's definitely still there. And so for me, what does it mean to bring that through to my family as a father? Well, it's a piece that I want to bring through, and because of the context of my family history and the disconnection of my grandmother to my mother's learned a lot and reconnected a lot with her culture as she got older, which has meant that I've been able to reconnect with my culture at a lot younger age. And so now my daughter gets to grow up and experience life in that culture now from birth. And literally from birth, when my daughter was born, she's 2.5 now. my mum and one of my aunties from back home wove a traditional birthing mat. So this is something that Aboriginal babies would have been birthed on, or carried on really close after birth. And now we didn't birth, my wife didn't birth our baby onto this mat, but we had it as a symbol of this beautiful new experience and the entering of the baby into the world. What we did, however, do was we had a wooden coolerman, um, and that wooden coolerman I ended up sanding down and working myself. And a coolerman's like a little bowl that would have been used to carry, herbs or gatherings, or even children. It could have been used to carry children. And when my daughter was born, and then my wife birthed the placenta, we put the placenta onto the coolerman to create a placenta print. And so that Coolerman now is my daughter's, and it has a marking of the placenta, the thing that gave her life, that was inside of my wife, and feeding her. And now that is marked there forever. And it will be on that piece of wood that was created and taken from a tree and shaped by myself. And so it becomes this intertwining of my daughter's arrival into this plane, into this world, and our cultural connection. And we'll do the same for my next child. We've got another Coolerman. We've got another birthing mat that's being woven in a different way to my daughter's, and the Coolerman's a different shape. But we'll follow that same process. And that is a way of embedding that cultural experience and cultural connection in the modern day now into my children's life from the very beginning. And that will continue on in various different iterations, and how they learn, and the sorts of things that they're exposed to. So yeah, it's and again, just in the rituals of every day, how we sit down and have mealtime, how we're lighting a candle at dinner, and that's something that we're doing. We're saying a blessing on our food before we eat. All of these sorts of things are different ways that we can create our lifestyle, and the culture of our family, right? That is informed by the culture of my ancestors and my lineage. So I'm bringing that through and expressing it today, within my family. So.
What has that meant on a personal level for yourself to really allow yourself to reconnect?
Oh man, it's extremely fulfilling. It's extremely fulfilling because there's a knowing in my body that this feels right. And yeah, it is that it feels right, and it feels there's a deep connection to those that have gone before me, and a remembrance. I would say it's a remembrance of something deep within my DNA. There's a remembrance of these things, and while it might look different on the surface or within the context, there are elements that are coming through, and in a way, I know how proud my grandmother would be to know that this is we're through practicing this, we're honoring her. We're also honoring every other person that's come before us. It's paying reverence, or bringing reverence rather, to what they endured, what they had taken away from them, and what we can now bring back. And it feels like a responsibility to bring it back. And to celebrate it and go, this is something we can be really proud of. And it's allowed me to stand really strong in my identity, and that aspect of my identity, and stand up and say, this feels right. This feels right for me. And in a way, I want to protect it. I want to protect it because it's sacred. It's something that's sacred.
Yeah, like for me, when you're speaking it, it feels like you're creating a, a reconnection. Like there's this new creation of how this looks in this modern world, but there's also a deep reverence and a deep lineage that is coming through that, so that we can have the awareness of what that is in this modern world. And I feel like that's needed so deeply. Like we spoke of this briefly before coming on. Like for the Aboriginal people, this disconnection has occurred more recently. And I still
Mm.
feel as a white man, as like cultural lineage from that, from British, from Ireland, all these different places, there's a disconnection for myself. So there's like
mm,
not only for Indigenous people where you're bringing through a transmission of like what it means to connect to ancestry, but also for
mm,
me as like from a different lineage, I feel there's this invitation, and I know for our listeners as well, of like, cool, what does our lineage like ask us to do? Like, how's it look when we
mm,
connect to that and bring that through? Because I believe we've all got gifts that we can share for one another and bring to life. And like, your lineage can teach me things, my lineage can teach you. And like, in that, we can
mm,
have a beautiful honor in, but also a coming together in a creation of something new in a completely different way.
mm. Yeah, man, I love that, and that's something that I try and bring to people's attention too. Is in this space that we're in, the kind of health, wellness, new age spirituality, whatever you want to call it, there is elements of what I've seen and feel as cultural appropriation of Indigenous practices. Um, and while I don't think the majority of these have malicious intent, what I feel like it is a crying out for a reconnection to a deep cultural wisdom, and that it's Indigenous practices are accessible. You can go and buy sage smudge in every fucking crystal store around the country, right? You can go and buy a yiraki or a didgeridoo in a souvenir shop at the airport. And I mean, man, those things make me wild. But they are accessible. It doesn't mean that they're right, but they are accessible. And people, when you connect back to that, when you burn sage, there's undoubtedly this feeling of, oh, there's something ancient about this. And because there is, you hear the hum of a didgeridoo or the banging of a drum, and something inside you goes, oh, there's something deep and ancient to this. There is. Now, what does that look like for you? What does that look like for your lineage, not someone else's lineage? Because if you connect to somebody else's lineage, you're going to get this, a tiny aspect of what that actually feels like. But what did your ancestors play? And I know we've spoken about this before, right? Drums were around in all cultures everywhere across the globe, or majority of cultures. Now, you could pick up and play a Native American drum, or what if your lineage is from the British Isles or from Scandinavia, and you pick up a traditionally made Nordic drum and you play that? Now tell me how you feel. Like, let's get back to that. And when we get back to that place, you don't have to surrogate or supplement somebody else's culture for something that you feel like you want, or something that's your birthright. It's your birthright to connect to your culture, just as it's my birthright to connect to mine. And so let's share that birthright and let's share our culture in a way that honors each of them, not in a way that goes, oh, yeah, I feel yours. Yours look cool. I'm going to have that. Because there's layers of complexity around those things. And so I always encourage people, I say, you connect with these practices, beautiful. Now, what does that look like for your lineage? Let's do some research. And for Aboriginal people, that disconnect and that severance, the attempted severance rather, of that cultural connection only happened 300 years ago. Now, for somebody that comes from a British lineage, those indigenous practices, those in a way pagan practices, there is layers of complexity and multiple generations where there was an attempted severance of that. But that still burns inside you. It burns inside you like my desire and um, my desire to bring forward my culture burns inside me. And so let's connect to that. Like, and you tell me and you show me what that means for you. Because I get to experience, I'd love it. I'd love you to experience that also.
I'm feeling this conversation deeply, and the piece that is there for me is this level of admitting our own ignorance. I've had this conversation with you several times where I'm like, I'm ignorant of a few of these things. And I think in our culture, there's such an aversion to owning that disconnect or not knowing. It's like, hey, I don't actually know, and that be okay. Because that from that place we can actually learn. Then we can get curious. Then we can start to explore. But so many people, especially when it comes to I guess spirituality, it's like the ego becomes that. And I know for me, a lot of these beautiful, like for me, a lot of Native American, that was an access point for me into spirituality. And it was like that keyhole that allowed me to open a door and be like, oh my God, there's such a greater world that I wasn't aware of. And it gave me a pathway into that, but that there was an ego association with that of like, now that's me, that's who I am. But there's a stagnation that occurs if I don't allow there to be a deeper invitation of like, actually, like, what did my lineage do? What was my like birthright, as you're speaking to? Like, what would have I done if I was born 1,000 years ago? What would my ancestors been doing? How would have they been operating? How would have they been sharing their soul with one another? And if we can allow ourselves to sit within that ignorance, not as a way of avoiding it, but saying, shit, I don't know right now. And that's okay, because then that gives me the opportunity to learn, not as a way to say, I'm ignorant and I'll never learn. That's a completely different kettle of fish that is avoidance, and we need to address that. But actually being like, oh, cool, yeah, there is lineage that I've used because I know I have. I've used different lineages to help me connect spiritually or like whatever it was because that was all I knew. And it's like, cool. I know from our conversation there's a deeper invitation for me. And there's ways I've started to honor that. Like I've got a mugwort plant growing outside my balcony. Like for me,
Mm,
mugwort is that
love it.
I start to connect to my lineage because that's the Druidic, that's the Celtic. There's invitation there, but that's only just begun. But starting there,
Mm,
it gives an open invitation. So it's not to, for me, it's not to shame or shun anything I've used up until this point. Like I've got a drum on the wall there. I don't claim to have anything from Native American culture or learning from that, but that drum was given to me, and I trust that it was given to me for a reason. So I'll still use that, but I also won't claim that, hey, I'm doing this from a Native American place. That's not me. But to honor my
mm,
own journey with it and to speak truthfully from that, and to also speak truthfully of my own ignorance in that situation.
mm, mm. Yeah, brother, and I feel like that's a really it's a mature place to come from when it comes to this and the sharing of the culture. And as you go on your journey, you're able to learn more and share more of what is
Mm.
deeply of connection to you. And I would just love to see more of that. You know, there was a time I got angry about it. I got angry around what I saw as cultural appropriation, and it made me angry because of the the systematic attempt at trying to remove that from Aboriginal people. That's what made me angry, and that people were now bringing that back while other Aboriginal people still had, wounds that they needed to heal, um, and that to me wasn't fair. And now I think I've come to a place with it that I want to use those examples to help people reconnect to their own culture and reconnect to their own lineage and ancestry, and own lineage of spirituality. What does that look like for you and your perspective? Because I don't know. And I'd love to be invited along that journey. I'd love to be invited to the practices that you deeply connect with when you learn how to guide them. um, and I'll do the same for you. Yeah, I would love to get to a place like that, and I'm seeing it more. I interviewed a guy on my podcast who did, very similar to you. Mugwort is a part of his lineage, and he brought that through in a fire ceremony that he was holding for men. And I thought, what a beautiful example of being able to share and bring that forward. So,
And I think with this, there is that piece of exploration, like of willing to explore. Like so much of spirituality can become from a place of ego, where it's like, I've got the crystals, I've got the sage, and now this is who I am. And it may not feel right. Like you may be there with your sage, with your crystals, and it's like, this is just kind of looks right, but it's not actually who I am. And
Mm,
there's an invitation to actually start to explore of like, what what calls to you, what really feels right for you. Like for me, it's been looking at like Western esoteric traditions of magic. Like there've been things that have been passed down for thousands of years, and I do practices like that are completely out of the box for a lot of people, but they feel like more powerful than, say, sometimes when I do breath work. It's like, oh, that's part of
mm,
my lineage from that. And without that willingness to explore, or being stuck in that identity of, oh, I don't know about magic, or I don't know about like stuff like that, it would have really limited that ability to firstly get it wrong, because I could have done that and it's like, oh, this isn't for me, and that's okay, move on and continue to find what
mm,
works. But that permission of, this feels true for me, okay, let me sit with this, let me get to know this, whether that's for a meditation, if it's like anything from anything, let yourself explore and get to know that before becoming, this is me. Like that for me is a big piece. For you, if there was like an invitation you could give people in terms of this, or like a share, and you could invite people deeper into themselves, was there something you could offer for this topic?
yeah, look, brother, I would say if there's the desire there, there's a desire to connect with spirituality, or maybe you've started to connect with some of these cultural practices, and you're like, oh, I went to this event and sage really did something for me, or I heard the didgeridoo play or a drum play, and it really resonated within me deeply. That could be an indication that ripple has started. That here's the beginning of your exploration. And now, instead of saying, "Oh, the didgeridoo resonated with me. That's mine. I'm going to go out and learn and play it and whatever," it's like, yes, connect with that and hold reverence for it and acknowledge that you have a connection to that. Now start to explore. Well, actually, where am I from? Where is my cultural heritage? Where's my ancestral lineage? What did they practice? When did they stop practicing that? What is the history of all these things? These are questions you can start to ask yourself. And, the creative mind, going full circle, is a curious mind. Be curious, open to curiosity. Curiosity, play, and creativity are all interwoven. And you start that journey, who knows what's coming? That would be my offer and my invitation.
That is beautiful, man. I really, really appreciate that. I feel like we're moving to the end of this conversation. This has been truly, truly beautiful, man, to drop in and connect and share, even from creation to cultural appropriation, and be able to explore a lot of this, and for myself, learn and continue to have these conversations. Before we finish up, brother, is there anything left alive? And then after that, we'll give some space if there's anything you've got coming up to share with the audience, or how to connect with you as well.
Mm. Just to, by the way, I think that's a beautiful title, from creation to cultural appropriation, or cultural appropriation to creation. So just TM that one. But I think just remembering that we're all creators. We're all creators. We create every single day. And it's just layers of story and conditioning that have blocked that for us. So I encourage everybody, in whatever way that you can, is create today, create tomorrow, create every day, and connect to that place. Um, yeah, it's a beautiful place to be operating from.
Thank you, man. So, if anyone was looking for you, man, or if there's any offerings you have up that you'd love to share with the audience, how would they find you? How would they connect?
Thank you, man. My work's taking a little bit of a pause for a while, and that's with the arrival of my second child. I'm going into the baby bubble, but I'll still be posting regular content on my Instagram and my Facebook. Facebook, Seth Westhead, Westhead, and Instagram S_Westhead. I also have an active mailing list. All the links to that are in the bio of my Facebook and Instagram. On my mailing list, I share some more deeper reflections and any new work that's coming up weekly. Also, run a podcast that's just started season 2 as well. So, the Sentient Savage podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also the Buzzsprout web app. So, they're the best ways to get in contact. Follow my work, follow what I do, follow what I create, and yeah.
Cool, Seth. Absolute pleasure to have you on. I highly recommend if anyone wants to connect, go find them, go find Seth, give him a follow, give him a message if you have any questions. Brother, so great to have you on. Thank you, man.
Thanks, brother. Big love.
Big love.